Good morning, members. It's the scheduled time, and I now call the meeting to order as we've already formed a quorum. We have 4 papers today, and the administration submitted paper ECI number 4 to members for circulation, and that paper has set out that since 2002, with regard to the information concerning the changes to the establishment of the directorate grade and also the changes of the 4 discussion items on the establishment of the directorate grade. I'd like to remind members that if there are any direct or indirect pecuniary interests relating to today's discussion items, then in accordance with Rule 83A, members should disclose the nature of such interest before they speak. I'd also like to draw members' attention to Rule 84 with regard to the requirements for voting with regard to direct pecuniary interest. Item 1 is to recommend to create 9 directorate posts and 3 supernumerary posts, and one would also be AOSD SGB, that is a D3, and also an AOSGC, that is D2, and also 1 PEPO at D1 for a period of 4 years. And there would also be 2 supernumerary posts, that is 1 Assistant Director of Environmental Protection for 6 years and 1 Principal Environmental Protection Officer for 6 years at D1. That's for a period of 6 years. And 2 Principal Environmental Protection Officer for 5 years at D1. And also the creation of a permanent post for the implementation of the Producer Responsibility Scheme on plastic beverage containers. On the 25th of February this year, the Environment Panel was consulted. With us today, our Secretary for the Environment, Mr. Wong Kim Sing, Ms. Cheng Mei Si, and also Mr. Donald Ng, the Deputy Director for Environmental Protection, and Mrs. Vicky Kwok, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Elvis O, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, and Mr. Kenneth Chen, Assistant Director, Special Task, Environmental Protection Department. As Mr. Julius Ho, Chairman of the Environment Panel, is not a member of this subcommittee, and he's also not able to attend today's meeting. I'll be setting out the salient points of discussion at the Environment Panel in accordance with the Secretariat's information. On the 25th of February this year, the Environment Panel discussed the establishment proposal, and members did not object to the submission of the proposal to the ESC, as some of the permanent or supernumerary posts at directorate grade under this proposal would have to do with the municipal solid waste charging. But then, as the 2018 waste disposal bill is still being scrutinized, some members question that before the passage of that amendment bill and also before the charging scheme has been approved, what are the justifications for creating or recreating those posts? In particular, some members are concerned about the period of those supernumerary posts, that is for 5 or 6 years. Would that be appropriate? And also with regard to the measures for the measures under the scheme, and how the department is able to enhance or step up coordination with other departments. They also have queries. That's why, after considering members' views and comments, they have changed the proposal to creating the Principal Environmental Protection Officer for a period of 4 years instead of the original proposal. And before coming to this subcommittee, they have also provided the following supplementary information. A, that is with regard to the 9 directorate posts to be created or recreated. They will be setting out the details of the terms of duties and also the timetable for implementing those duties. And also with regard to the 9 proposed directorate posts, how many directorate officers would be deployed under them, and also the NCSC officers to support them. That would also be set up, and also the examples or measures to be put together by the EPD and other departments on implementing the MSW charging and also waste reduction and also recycling facilities, and those have been set out in paper number CB-1974-02, and it has been circulated to all members. Any questions from members? Mr. Wu Chi-wai, first round. Yes, you may now ask questions. Thank you, Chairman. I'm of the view that the Secretary has taken on board the views of the panel, and as a result, some of the permanent posts have now been changed to supernumerary posts. I think it's a good direction to take, and I hope that the administration will take heed of good advice every time coming to this council. They should not just think that so long as they have enough votes, they need not take heed of our advice. That's not good. And my first question is about the rolling out of the MSW charging scheme. I've heard that in some public housing estates, you've been coordinating with the housing authority and you've procured some new machinery to see if there can be automatic collection of food waste so as to enable you to enable residents to hand over the food waste and also the behavioral pattern and so on. So I'd like to know how does that work, and also in the course of doing that, what other measures will have to be put in place, or is it to be done on a voluntary basis? Next, by adopting this approach, have you discussed with the housing department what additional measures can be put in place? Yes, at present we don't have MSW charging, and it's up to the public to reduce the volume of the waste, and there is no economic incentive whatsoever, because right now they can just dispose of them the way they like. But then if you're able to work with the housing department or the housing authority so that there can be arrangements, well, in the future the MSW charging will be backed up by law. But then right now you can also offer some economic incentive, and you can test it out with public housing estates, so that with the assistance of your tenancy agreement, you can see if that works and what kind of problems you may encounter. That would also enable you to have a better understanding as to what exactly is going to happen when indeed you're going to implement MSW charging. So is that possible? Can you introduce such pilot schemes? Or is it that you're expecting that there'll be a very short period before you can actually implement it after the passage of the law? Because we don't want to see a situation whereby we'll be overwhelmed by garbage because the situation is simply out of control. Okay, I'll try to answer the question and then I'll ask my colleagues to supplement. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your comment. In fact, what you thought was very similar to what we have in mind. In fact, with regard to MSW charging, it's just one of the pushes that we're going to put in place, but then there will also be the stick and carrot approach. That is, we will also be offering incentives so that we'll offer the public some incentives in order to help them reduce waste. For the rest, I'll defer to my colleague. Yes? Mrs. Kwok. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question and comment. In fact, what Mr. Wu just said was exactly what we had told members on earlier occasions. In introducing the MSW charging, there are also recycling measures and also waste collection measures. For example, we will also have this centrally coordinated food waste collection scheme. So other than C&I food waste that we're going to collect, we would also be setting aside some surplus capacity to deal with domestic food waste. We have also got the experience with some housing estates where they have got sorting and also food waste collection experience. And there are about a dozen or so public housing estates which have taken part in food waste collection and waste reduction schemes. And as Mr. Wu just said, through this pilot scheme, we would also like to test out that how we might be able to reduce waste at source, so that we can also make use of technology to reduce the odor nuisance, for example. Yes, sir, I'd like to stop her for a while. Yes, I understand that there are some tools that have been used in order to reduce the nuisance that might be caused. But then my question is, in the experimental stage, can the situation be made more like the actual situation? For example, well, you might be penalizing people for failing to do certain things, and now you don't have to do that. So on the contrary, can you offer some economic incentives which are comparable, so that you can offer such incentives in order to test that out to see if it's effective? Can that be done? Please be precise and concise. Yes, Madam Chair, we'll be talking to the Housing Authority again on this. We agree that with some incentives that would be conducive to encouraging individual tenants to make use of our waste collection tools. So we'll be taking that up with the Housing Authority. Mr. Yu Si Wing, first round. Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the MSW charging arrangements, basically I support it. But as we can see, the administration has put in a lot of effort in reducing waste, and also in terms of waste collection and recycling. Now you're introducing this charging scheme in order to encourage the public to do a better job in environmental protection. That's good.
Well, I'm afraid that may be wishful thinking, and there are many factors which will be impeding the achieving of the targets. Well, recently we have seen news reports that in the mainland, also in Southeast Asian countries, the authorities refuse accepting waste paper and waste plastic. If we have done a lot of recycling schemes and there is no way out in terms of exporting such waste, what can you do? Say, if the mainland and other places refuse to accept plastic waste, what alternative will you have? Another question is on formulating policy in terms of supervision on recycling, and also in terms of provision of service. Quite a lot has been done in terms of providing service. There are responsibilities and duties, but the indicators are not clear. You have 200 or so people for outreaching. If they just go out to do publicity and promotion without any targets, then you will only spend a lot of money, and targets are not achieved if you don't put pressure on them. So apart from putting responsibility on them, will there be indicators and targets so that there will be a measure of outcomes? Will you do that? The third question is about the community green centers. Are you going to give support to these centers? And after giving money, do you ask them to achieve certain targets and meeting certain indicators? The Secretary. I will answer questions 1 and 3, and my colleague will answer question 2. I understand the point made by Mr. Yeo. If we look at successful examples, they do have recycling and incentives, and waste charging is very basic. It is the locomotive. We need the two-prong approach. As for the exporting of waste plastics, basically, the waste plastics are collected of high level or high quality, and they are approaching the quality of final products. And there should be a lot of outlets for such waste plastic. As for the community recycling centers, they are able to achieve the target set. Ms. Kwok. Thank you, Member, and thank you, Chairman. With regard to the outreaching teams, we do have targets for them. Now we will set up an outreaching and recycling branch, and we therefore hope that you will support the creation of the three related directorate posts. And there will be a outreaching team of about 200. And with such manpower, next year, our outreaching service will be extended from the 3 pilot areas to all the 18 districts. And we expect that 50,000 visits can be made by the outreaching teams. We do have indicators. We hope that by 2020 or the end of 2020, with regard to the 3 areas under the pilot scheme, we will cover all the residential buildings and make 50,000 visits, and we will extend the scheme gradually to the remaining 15 districts. The second round, please wait for that. Next, Mr. Chen Ying. The creation of 9 posts includes the municipal waste charging, also dealing with other solid waste, and the total expenditure is more than $25 million, and they are supported by 200 odd non-directorate posts, and they need about $90 million altogether, $119 million. 142 are NCSC employees, and the remaining will be covered by the $90 million. So for the NCSC, how much will be spent on the NCSC employees? Another question is about waste plastic bottles. The EPD is going to appoint a contractor to purchase green plastic recyclable materials from the non-industrial sector, and tendering exercise had been conducted in February this year. What is the progress? If the price of waste plastic bottles is low, then will the government continue to subsidize this arrangement? It is going to spend $120 million. Our concern is that with much efforts, is there any effect on reducing municipal solid waste? What data will you be disclosing in order, macro data, to show that you can really achieve something? There are several questions. I asked my colleague Donald to answer first, and then supplemented by Vicky. The DD, Mr. Donald Ng. And thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chen, for the question. Let me speak on the various measures and their implications on municipal solid waste, and whether we have targets and whether we will be able to provide indicators and updated information. If we refer to municipal solid waste with waste charging, the overall volume of waste can be reduced by nearly 30%. That's our target. Through charging, through various recycling measures, the overall quantity of waste will be reduced to that amount. And we also provide regular information to the public on the amount of MSW collected. After the implementation of various measures, we will be able to meet the targets set. Madam Kwok, thank you for the question. Let me refer to plastic waste. Now, there are different markets for plastic waste, and some of them have refused the import of such waste. But if plastic waste is turned into resources, then they can be imported by those countries. We are also encouraging recycling business in Hong Kong, so the different types of plastic waste can be converted into various types of resources. And also we have the producer responsibility scheme. The purpose is to provide more effective export channels so that they can be recycling materials and they can be turned into different types of final products. What about the 122 NCSC employees? Who is going to pay for that? To what account is the amount charged? That's within the 120 million budget. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Chairman, thank you. With regard to the proposal to create 9 directorate posts in the EPD, they are all related to MSW, whether it is for the preparation of MSW charging, on waste reduction, on recycling. These are urgent tasks. The department, therefore, has to increase its manpower in order to implement the policies. I and my colleagues in the party are supportive of these proposals. We support these measures. This is a long-term task. It cannot be finished within a few years. So there will be an end to the terms of these supernumerary posts, and when they come forward to ask for renewal, we will not object to that. As for waste reduction, I'm really disappointed. In 2017, the waste per capita increased by 3% in comparison with the previous year, and in comparison with 2012, an increase of 12%. Our neighboring cities are very concerned about environment and also have made achievements in reduction of waste. Yet in Hong Kong, waste continue to increase, not to say reducing. The government has put in a lot of efforts in recent years, including our first food waste disposal plant, handling 200 tons a day. There is also waste to energy facility. Works are going on. I want to ask, there is reclamation in Shek Wu Chau according to works in progress. When will the facility be put into place? Whether it's waste paper or waste plastic, Hong Kong cannot handle it on its own in respect of recycling and reuse. We need to strengthen our logistics efforts. At the end of the day, we need to rely on our neighboring cities, which have the industrial base to deal with that. And the GBA framework puts strong emphasis on ecology and environment. Therefore, it is necessary to work with the GBA cities. So I just want to know whether there is any plan to cooperate with the GBA cities in the area of recycling and reuse in order to achieve the objectives of a recycling economy. Thank you, Dr. Low, for your support and your understanding, and we adopt a multi-pronged approach in dealing with waste reduction. And waste charging is very important and effective. Dr. Low has two other questions. First, the waste incinerator in Chekuchao is now being built. The target is to complete the works in 2024 and then commencement of operation in the same year. And the maximum capacity is about 3,000 tons, which is 1/3 of municipal solid waste. As for the GBA related question is about regional cooperation in the area of recycling and reuse. That is a golden opportunity, and we will work together, and we will also talk to the industry in formulating policy. As for the general direction of building an ecological and green culture, that's the general direction, and it's very important, and more cooperation is needed. Second round, your second round, Mr. Tony Chair. It's his first round. Yes, my first round. My apologies.
We're talking about 9 posts, and majority of them are supernumerary posts. And then if you look at their list of responsibilities, other than MSW charging, some of them have to do with the reduction of plastic waste. With regard to the time limit for the supernumerary posts, and also the reason why we need to have a permanent post, it's hard to understand. Probably in response to some comments by members, some changes have been made. Say, for example, on MSW charging, we are now scrutinizing the relevant amendment bill, and it will take some time before the bill will be passed, and together with some publicity and education initiatives to suggest that it can be implemented by the end of next year might be a little optimistic. And now you have proposed the post for 4 years, and there are 2 others for some other period of time. So how come you are proposing that these supernumerary posts would be for a period of 4 years? And then on plastic waste, yes, for plastic beverage containers, and also disposable plastic tableware. Why is it that they have been dealt with separately? Because they are, after all, plastic tools. So why do you have to separate them so distinctly? Why can't we just have one officer to deal with both issues? Yes, Mr. Ng. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your question. With regard to disposable plastic beverage containers, we propose that a permanent post be created. So that's PEPO to deal with this producer responsibility scheme. And the honourable member was also asking about the reason why we are targeting beverage containers. Because if you look at plastic beverage containers, actually they have taken up some 60% of the total quantity of plastic waste. That's why in the first stage, we'll deal with the beverage containers first. And then for the permanent post that we propose to create, he will also kickstart other initiatives. For example, with regard to plastic beverage containers, some personal plastic instruments would also be targeted. For example, some personal care bottles would also be incorporated. So we hope that for the PRS, that can be extended to other sectors and other areas. With regard to what about tableware, plastic tableware? Well, for plastic tableware, we have also put in place some initiatives. So for disposable plastic tableware, what the arrangement should be, we are looking into that. But then they are both plastic waste, and they're also related to the catering industry. You've got this permanent post for MSW. It's still a supernumerary post, but then for plastic waste, you have this permanent post. How come the post holder is not dealing with both plastic tableware and plastic bottles? So for tableware, they are still looking into that. Yes, we are first targeting beverage containers because we have the PRS targeting that. And for plastic tableware, we have already got existing officers to deal with them. And then on the number of people to deal with MSW charging, that's because we are proposing to have a supernumerary post. It's also a PEPO at D1 to conduct relevant studies for the charging scheme. For example, the development of collection system or the charging system, and also with regard to the overall work concerning the contracts. So for the newly created PEPO post at D1, we hope that he'll be responsible for such initiatives. Thank you. So do you also have to phase out disposable plastic tableware? What will be done about it? Well, you'll have to wait for your next turn. Dr. K.K. Kwok, first round. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I support the creation of these 9 posts. But then concerning the government's proposal on waste disposal, I'd like to express my deepest regret or disappointment because we are lagging behind the whole world. Actually, even if you look at the pledge that they have made, every time they are letting us down. For example, some colleagues just now talk about plastic tableware. They are still thinking about how they're going to deal with it. Well, by 2021, EU has already made it clear that all plastic tableware and also drinking straws will be banned. So they're going to implement it in 2021, and still we are scratching our head as to when we're going to do it. And then for waste charging, they have talked about it since the last term, and they are still talking about this during this term. So it's not us dragging your feet. In fact, the pro-establishment camp members might be pulling you over again, and as a result the legislation might be delayed and delayed. So this kind of performance by the administration, I think you have not been able to discharge your duties to the public. Secretary, you were representing the government to sign the Paris Treaty, and we're supposed to discharge our obligations under the treaty. But then, given what we have done so far, a couple of days ago, you've just been talking about recycling materials being dumped in the landfills, and also, well, you have not been able to do anything about paper and plastics waste, and some improvements have been made since then. But then, to what extent is that true? Well, the thing is, as long as they have left Hong Kong, we cannot be bothered. So I'm not going to oppose the posts being proposed. In fact, you should have shown greater determination in doing this. So my couple of questions are as follows. With regard to the EU, and also if we try to align ourselves with other countries, we need to have a timetable. For example, 2021, 2022, by which time that Hong Kong will be banning the use of all disposable plastic tableware, and also by 2025 in the EU, majority or most of the countries that are using plastics to manufacture plastic beverage containers, they will also have to make sure that they would be using recyclable materials to manufacture those bottles. That's what the rest of the world is doing. So when are we going to do the same? So can you have that blueprint for us? Secretary, I agree with what the member just said. In terms of waste reduction, we will have to do a bit more. And on MSW charging, well, in many places they have already done it, and we have been lagging behind. That's true. But then we have to look at it from two angles. Well, for the EU's so-called disposable plastic tableware, in fact, the ban is not as strict as what you have described. In some cases, they will have to find replaceables or substitutes. In others, they would be banning it altogether. But then we will have to look at the different situations in different places. Taking Hong Kong as an example, we are a densely populated city, and we also have a lot of eateries and so on, but then it doesn't mean that we are not going to do anything at all. We'll be making reference to the European experience, and then we will have to look at the situation on the ground in Hong Kong, but then we'll be stepping up our effort so that we'd be able to implement that as soon as possible. If you look at the situation in Asia, in fact, in some other places, they have already put in place such regulations, but then in most of the Asian cities, they are still looking into it, like what we've been doing, but then we'll be speeding up the pace so that we'll be able to move forward. And then one of the initiatives is that whatever is related, we'll be conducting relevant studies to look at the local situation, and we've also got a timetable that is within next year. We'll be coming up with concrete proposals as to what the administration and the public will be doing. Secretary, after I've heard you, in fact, that's even more infuriating, because I was asking about a concrete timetable, because studies like that have not been created by Hong Kong, and if you'd like to get specific figures, I'm sure any of your colleagues seated next to you will be able to browse the net and then get hold of the statistics, and even on the economic impact and so on and so forth. They've already done that in Europe. They've already got numerous studies. So I'm asking for a blueprint and also a timetable. So you said that it's not as late as 2022. So can you tell us exactly when you're going to do it? Can you give a brief reply? Well, it's very specific. Well, for the studies, yes, we'll be making reference to overseas experience, but then we will also have to look at the local situation, and therefore we cannot rely on others. We will have to do it we will have to do it ourselves before we can have a clear idea as to what we're going to do. Next, Kwong Chun-Yu. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to take the opportunity to put this to the Secretary. That is, there have been several plans, and there have been a lot of comments. For example, you talk about the WEEE. Well, I expect that you've been doing that for 8 months, and at present there have been criticisms that is on the street we can still see a lot of electrical devices being disposed of on the street. So what is your comment or assessment on the effectiveness of this? Well, we have heard that there have been too few collectors, and there have also been claims that there are monopolies and so on. So what is your view? And there are some 7 green groups, so that there would be at least 700 people who will be looking at the waste reduction program, so that you can have a 200-man outreaching team. You would also have to expand the size of the team. So what is your take on this? And also on MSW charging, according to your assessment, the latest timetable. So how are you going to roll that out? 3 questions. Secretary. Well, I'll answer the first question, and then Donna will answer the rest. For the producer responsibility scheme that has been in place for about a year, and then if you look at the number of the amount of such waste being collected, we've been able to do that rather effectively. So it's not about the public procuring electrical appliances and so on. So it's not that there is some room for improvement in terms of their awareness. Yes, we will of course step up our publicity, and when you buy a piece of electrical appliance, you will also have to understand your rights. So even if you do not buy one of those, there is also a hotline available, and when you call them, they will also be prepared to help you, so that they can collect the waste for you to dispose of them. So we'll be publicizing that more widely so that the consumers will understand it better. Donald, on the timetable on the waste charging scheme, well, by the end of last year, we tabled the legislation before this council, and is still being scrutinized by the relevant bills committee. And our timetable is that once the bill is passed, there will be 1 year or 18 months grace period, and during that period, we will enable different stakeholders and the public and the administration to make preparation for the full implementation of it. And we hope that by end of 2020, we'll be able to fully implement the MSW charging scheme. As regards the outreaching team, I've also talked to Mr. Kwong with regard to the establishment of the WRO, the Waste Reduction Office, and after the passage of the bill on waste charging scheme and also other support measures, for example, the PRS and also the outreaching service and so on, through the WRO, we're going to roll out those initiatives. Thank you. So we expect that with regard to the manpower requirement, so we still have about 100 or so staff in the WRO to implement the initiatives on the MSW charging and also waste reduction initiatives. Thank you. A simple follow-up. You said that with regard to the WEEE, is it that there are too few collectors and also there is a monopoly? Because according to some collectors, in terms of the amount of collected waste, that's not very much. And according to the 7 green groups, well, they might be asking for some 200 people. And well, you might have 200 people, but then they are asking for 700. So what is your response? Who is to answer? Mr. Ng? In fact, well, the green groups suggested that with regard to the WRO, well, for the 700 that they're asking, in fact, that would also include some people who are responsible for enforcement.
As for the number of 300 or 400, the number does not include the law enforcing officers after the implementation of MSW charging. So there's a difference. Apologies. I referred to the WEEE. How many recyclers are there? Will the number be too small? As for WEEE, most of the existing retailers have got the government contractor to provide the service. Earlier on, according to the development of the market, we have awarded a contract. We also have a tendering exercise for washing machines, which is not within the requirement of the law. We will continue to improve the relevant arrangements on dealing with WEEE. Next, Mr. Yu Siu-wing, your second round. Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. A follow-up question to my previous question. Now, the authority says that the waste plastics will be turned into raw materials. But will Hong Kong be able to turn all waste plastics into raw materials? If the capacity is not enough, how will you deal with the excess plastic waste? Our waste paper are exported overseas. If overseas countries do not accept them, then are we able to deal with all the waste paper collected in Hong Kong? As for the outreaching team, they have a toll order. Is it a regular work after covering 50,000 or so households, making so many visits? Will they finish their work there and then, or will there be further work to be done? Will there be follow-up measures? And the third question is on the community green centers or CGCs. I've not heard very clearly whether targets will be set for the CGCs. You've paid the money, so you should measure the outcome in order to see whether you can achieve the expected targets. Chairman, I'll answer questions 1 and 2, and my colleague will answer question 2. The CGC is very simple. We set targets for the contractors, some on quantity, some on education. So it's transparent. As for waste paper and waste plastics, we are clear-headed. The mainland and other countries have very clear requirements for importing waste materials. So we have to, we will make sure that the contractors will give an undertaking before we implement the scheme. They will have to turn the waste materials into recyclable raw materials, and then they can be exported. The mainland is the main market for recycling paper. When waste paper reaching a certain quality standard, can be imported by the mainland. And in the Green Park, we are preparing to have a local paper factory to consume part of the waste paper or recycled paper collected in Hong Kong. Mam Kwok. Let me speak on the outreaching team. We hope that there can be 50,000 visits per year. That's only one of the targets. The outreaching team will also have to work with the stakeholders to build a network for achieving recycling and waste reduction. They will visit the waste recycling systems in the housing estates, and they will also seek improvement measures for such systems. So it is not a one-off task. There will be repeated liaison, and there will also be improvement to the market situation. They will visit the housing estates. They will also visit the commercial buildings and also the schools. Mr. Chen Chichun, your first round. We see that there are 3 supernumerary posts which are related to MSW charging, and the posts are for 4 years. I think that's an appropriate move. Yet, with regard to the law, when will that bill be passed? Is a time frame attached to the bill? If there is a time frame, then it can be very fast, just like the co-location bill. We can have several meetings a week, and with 8 or 10 hours per meeting. But if there is no deadline, then you can have 1 meeting per month and just 2 hours for 1 meeting, and that can last for a long time. Say, for example, the tourism industry bill, the Bills Committee has lasted for a year, and I really don't know how many hours had been spent on the MSW charging bill. You may have the records. Well, if there is no resumption second reading before the end of this term of the LegCo, then everything will be back to square one. Now, these 3 posts are for different tasks. Some may be some may before preparatory work. There will not be any waste of efforts. But what about the AD, MSW charging? If that's for the implementation of the law, then, and if we spend 1 year on studying the bill, then there are only 3 years remaining. That's to cooperate with stakeholders, labeling, and then labeling of various things, and also development of various work. That cannot be done within 3 years. And so are there anybody doing this kind of work already? Is there a deadline for the passing of the bill? Now, who's answer the question? The Secretary. Now, we have clear targets, and we have the determination. We hope that the LegCo will support us. There are various details in the bill in terms of charging, and we respect your views, and we need time to discuss with you. We have had 8 meetings of the Bills Committee, and we will work closely, or we continue to work closely with the chairman of the Bills Committee so that we can get the bill passed ASAP. If the bill can be passed within this year, there will be a preparatory period of 1 to 1.5 years. So by the end of next year, the scheme can be implemented, and that is very important to the task of reducing municipal solid waste, and therefore we look forward to your cooperation and support. Concerning these 3 posts, what kind of preparatory work can they do before the passing of the bill? The DD. Just now, concerning Mr. Chan's question, the DD is not just responsible for MSW charging. He or she is also responsible for waste reduction. As for preparatory work for MSW charging, there is a lot of work being done. Say, for example, the designated bags, and also setting up of networks, and also developing the fee charging system, the gate fee or gate charge arrangement. We need to do preparatory work for that, and we hope that these 3 posts can be created as soon as possible. Well, if you do have a deadline, if time is of essence, then you should try to get the message through so that the law can be passed very soon, and then you can start working. So do you have to start from square one if we can not pass a bill before the end of this term? When the bills are not passed before the end of the term, then they will lapse, and then everything will have to be redone. Next, Mr. Chu Hoi-dik. I have 2 questions, Madam Chairman. First, on paragraph 4, the waste reduction record is very poor. The waste per person is 3% higher in 2017 in comparison with 2016. In 2012, Mr. Wong proposed the blueprints for waste reduction from 2013 to 2017. The target set at that time was 1 kg per person in 2017. But now it was 1.45. If it is comparison with the target set in 2012 for 2017, the amount of waste per person is 0.45 kg per person in excess. concerning these stated targets set in 2012 or 2017, why was there such a big difference? If there was a reduction, if the reduction was small, that was still forgivable. But now it was an increase, and that's a failure. So, Mr. Secretary, do you have you learned any lesson from that? Out of that failure? And since you have not achieved the target set in the blueprint in 2013 and 2017, will you compile a report to reflect on that seriously? Mr. Wong, waste reduction is an important policy within the government. It is our proposal, and we have committed all our efforts on implementing it. Waste reduction is a collective effort by all the people of Hong Kong. There are important elements. Now, the biggest portion of waste in the landfills is food waste, and everybody can help in this. In recent years, the amount of food waste has changed. Our food waste scheme has helped to reduce food waste among the households. As for the industrial sector, the amount of food waste has been increasing. So we need to focus on this important area, which is outside the expectation of our plan. And there is also change in the recycling economy. Waste paper, recycling, waste paper which can be exported has also been affected. It's outside the expectation of our blueprint, and the tension between China and the United States has also contributed to a change in the market situation for waste.
So when compared to the original blueprint, there has been some discrepancy. So on the one hand, in terms of education and culture, that has been affecting us, and also some external factors, and also with regard to the hardware, we have also been lagging behind, and that would also affect the per capita waste production volume. But then I can see that for commercial and industrial food waste, that's more than expected. And also because of external factors, some of these will have to be dumped in our landfills. And third is because our hardware has not been able to catch up. So I don't think those are the only reasons. As far as the government is concerned, of course, you need to have that awareness, and of course, and also for the external factors, let's set that aside. All right, you talk about the human factors. So do you have enough people? That's why you're creating these posts. And second, you don't have enough money. And third, you don't have enough power. So when it comes to power, or the lack of it, so you're creating these posts. They are either in the bureau or in the department. So I'll be very quick. So with regard to waste reduction, I've repeatedly said that. So there is a division of labor, but then it has not been working well because initially, after the scrapping of the municipal councils, we no longer have the two municipal departments, and as a result of that, with regard to waste-related policies, we have the FEHD and then the EPD, both responsible for that, and they are scrambling for territory, and they are scrambling for powers. And up till now, we haven't seen that the two departments are actually able to work closely together because they are under two different bureaus. So my question is, other than increasing manpower, I don't know whether or not you should talk to the CE. So with regard to waste-related policies, should they be put under the same bureau? That is your bureau. Only then will you be able to have the necessary power to break through the bureaucratic establishment to deal with this problem effectively. It's a very long question. Please be brief in your reply. Well, we have this WRO, the Waste Reduction Office, that will be set up so that there can be more cross-departmental and bureau coordination. Next, KK Kwok. Well, I understand that one of the supernumerary posts will be dealing with the PRS, the Producer Responsibility Scheme. It's not very specific. Well, we all understand that for the PRS, when it applies to different corporations, they'll be able to buy themselves out because this responsibility scheme will mean that the costs will inevitably be passed on to the consumers. And second, that would also create a loophole that they'll be taking advantage of. All right, it's your responsibility. And then for plastic waste, well, that cannot be dealt with in 1,000 or 10,000 years, but then you can just deal with it using your ways and means, and then we will not be bothered. But then, even if we do not use such materials, even if we do not use plastic materials, it will still take 1,000 or 10,000 years to degrade such materials. But then the PRS simply will not be able to solve the problem. It's a question of whether we're going to use such materials. You're just allowing them to shift the responsibilities to somebody else. For example, Coca-Cola and other major corporations. Yes, well, you can introduce this scheme. Well, on the face of it, they're responsible, but then deep down, we are actually paying for it. So this is not going to work. So I'd like to ask that once again. That is with regard to the substitutes. That is in replacing or substituting plastic containers. You need to have a timetable, or else we simply will not be able to achieve it. In fact, there are new technologies available. For example, they can also use plant fibers, and they can also make containers out of them. And Hong Kong, as you said, is a very small city. That's precisely our niche. We can also apply such new technologies. For example, using China as an example, it has 1.4 billion people, and it would be hard. But then we only have 7 million people in Hong Kong, and therefore we can apply cutting-edge technology to do it. But then you have not been able to do it. So I find it very disappointing. So can you tell us? Can you also show us your remorse? That is, by 2022, well, this term of government is already coming to the close of its current term. Whether or not you're going to continue in the next term, I don't know. But then during this term, can you make a decision on the blueprint that we're going to take? Yes, it doesn't really matter. You can start the study, but then by 2020, you can have this blueprint that will be implemented in 2 or up to 4 years, and then you'll be replacing plastic containers with the new materials. So can you make that pledge? Secretary, well, during the last term of the government, we have also put in place this waste reduction plan for 10 years. So that's the food waste and yard waste plan for Hong Kong. So during this term of our government, we're going to implement many of the plans under that scheme. So we will attach or adhere to that timetable as far as possible. But then we don't just look at the timetable. We have been expediting things over the years which have not been contained in that plan. For example, in this year's policy address, we have already expanded our scope. And also, you talk about the PRS. When I heard what you said, I'd just like to say that, well, some green groups and academics have been very supportive of this. Yes, you said that, well, under a capitalistic system, it might not work. But then in the EU and in many other views, academics have been very supportive of that. They've been advocating that we should extend the scope of this. And they've been very supportive of the government doing this. But then when are you going to replace plastic containers with other substitutes? So my question is clear. That is before the end of your term in 2022, can you come up with a timetable and also the roadmap? Well, on beverage containers, PRS, we have already completed the study, and we are in contact with the stakeholders. Would like to roll out the consultation as soon as possible. So the roadmap is very clear. But then after the consultation on the legislative process, I'm sure you'd understand that we will have to work with this council before we can have a clearer idea. Second round, Eddie Chu. Thank you, Chairman. Well, just now the Secretary told me when I asked him whether waste-related policies will be put under the same bureau, and then the Secretary said that they have got this WRO, that is the Waste Reduction Office, which is under the EPD. And then, Secretary, on what basis do you think that you've already been able to respond to my question? Because I'm talking about a setup that is high up. So will the WRO be able to give directions or directives to the EPD? Can you answer that question? So is there a problem of scrambling for more power? Well, we all understand that there are different bureaus and departments under the government, and through internal coordination, we'll be able to do our job more effectively. I can give you an example, Madam Chair, because when I put it to the EPD, well, in-house together with outsourced staff, they have over 10,000 people, and they've also got 170 waste collection points, and also together with the villages, they are under the EPD, and then they will also be working on recycling. For example, they have the tricolor bins, and then some major institutions have also been given those bins. But then when they are very dirty, and if you look at the labels, basically they are not very meaningful at all in terms of waste reduction. So if the EPD, given the size of the department, which is in charge of a lot of resources, including space and manpower, and still the very core policy objective, that is to reduce waste, has not been achieved. So for the rest, is of secondary importance. Even if you have the legislation in place, you will have to push it over to another department with more resources and more manpower. So that's going to be a dead end. So for the FC members in this council, when it comes to environmental related legislation, they'll try to block it. Even for energy labeling, they try to block it. But then even within your bureaucratic system, this is a legacy from the previous set up. If the municipal councils have not been scrapped, then the municipal services departments will be able to take on board some of the duties under the EPD right now. But then now you have the LCSD and also the FEHD, and then the EPD was set up a bit later, and therefore you will need to restructure the government in order to ensure that you have enough powers to move forward. And therefore my question is, well, you talk about the WRO, which is so small, it's just a very small department or small office under the EPD, so it's like the tree office. So for the tree management office, it doesn't have any power at all. So I don't know how you call it. It's just a commander without any troops. So whenever it comes to trees, supposedly everybody will have to ask it for its advice, and yet it has no power at all. So have you heard what I said? So you really need to think hard about this. You will have to talk to the CE so that you can have more powers, and then the Bureau will also have to have more powers. So we will need the Environment Bureau to have more powers. All right, for the WRO, according to our thinking, we have thought it hard and thoroughly, and after making reference to comments from the community, the WRO will be responsible for coordinating such efforts in reducing waste. And then, as you said, there are some historical reasons why some of the duties are now placed under the FEHD. So do we need to step up coordination? For example, for collection and also recycling efforts, we will need to have more manpower to do it. And then the FEHD has signed some contracts. Should those contracts be handed over to the Bureau? We are thinking about this. Next, and Jiang, well, I've heard members talk about the CGS, and also you also have a single recycling operator collecting the WEEE. Well, there are some retailers, and they have a choice as to which contractor will be engaged, so long as that contractor is licensed to dispose of the waste in his or her facility. So originally it's an open structure, but then because of some mainstream, as most of the retailers have chosen the government-run facility, that's the reason why we have seen this phenomenon. But then we are actually looking at the situation and also their capacity, so that there would be another tendering exercise. That is, in terms of non-statutory procurement exercises, for example, for washing machine, is it possible that for some of the used washing machines, they can be handed over to other recyclers for processing? We're trying to ensure that there will be diversity in the market. In other words, well, for contractors with a license, there is only one. Is that right? That is Alba. There are about 10. So my colleague can also supplement. You mean the authorized dealers? Yes, up till March 2019. Well, we have 10 licenses that have been issued on waste disposal, and we're also processing some 10 applications. So you're processing 10 more applications. So you haven't approved any of them. We have already issued 10 licenses. There are 10 being processed. Okay, noted. Madam Chair, I'd like to put this to the Secretary. Secretary, have you watched a film? In fact, there was one several years. That's the Inconvenient Truth. So recently we have episode 2. So have you seen it? Have you seen it? I think the honourable member can ask a specific question. I think this is a specific question. Have you seen that movie, Inconvenient Truth? So what has that got to do with the post that we have been asked to approve? Environmental protection. But then it's about whether or not we need such posts. So for the 9 directorate posts, will they be able to work more on environmental protection? And of course, that also has to do with strategies and planning and so on.
Okay.
It's about many aspects. So I just want to know from the Secretary concerning the film I referred to. It is in relation to serious environmental issues, in particular climate change or global warming. And global warming comes from greenhouse gases. My question is in relation to this. With regard to these posts, are they related to the plan for reducing greenhouse gases? The Secretary, waste reduction will certainly help to reduce carbon emission. With regard to climate change, and we have the Blueprint 2030 Plus on the reduction of carbon emission. That's in line with the Paris Agreement. And we have asked the Sustainability Council to conduct an engagement exercise with the general public on formulating the long-term, deep-level, more effective carbon reduction efforts. That's in the area of power supply, power reduction, and waste reduction. We ask you to give us your advice on waste reduction, on reducing carbon emission. And waste charging is also an important issue in respect of that. Secretary, my suggestion is that the number of cars is rising, please make proposals to the transport department because the number of cars are really rising. Dr. K.K. Kwok, your third round. I think, Madam Chairman, this is my last round. Now, Mr. Wong, you assumed office in 2012, and by 2017, solid waste increased by 12% in comparison with 2012. You know that. You've proposed a 10-year waste reduction plan from 2012 to now. Has not the administration failed after 7 years? In paragraph 8, it said that there is a pilot scheme on the reduction of non-industrial plastic waste and also food waste collection. Well, I'm really disappointed. I don't know how long your plan will be. As for your waste charging plan, you say it's in the short term, but it takes a very long time. So if it is a long-term plan, how long will that be? I have also asked about the plastic waste reduction blueprint. That's related to the PRS. Waste will continue to rise despite your targets. You've referred to green groups. I don't comment on them. I look at numbers only. The PRS will only let producers to rest assured that they can continue to produce more waste because they have paid for that. They've paid for the indulgence. With the introduction of PRS, we will not be able to see the reduction of waste per person. You need to have set clear targets. You don't need just to feel good. The Secretary, if you look at numbers concerning plastic beverage containers, the amount is about less than 100 tons per day. That is less than 1% of the total waste in Hong Kong. So if you look at the blueprint, you can see the weight of that kind of waste. But anyway, we have to deal with that. This is high quality waste plastic. There is room for improvement, and we should enhance the recycling. That is only a small portion of waste in Hong Kong. Our blueprint have set important tasks for us, and in fact we have done our best. Some we have done it for some. We have done it with a bit later. Say for example the food waste treatment center. As for the overall amount of waste, it is higher than we expected. But we have done our best, and we hope that the public will work together to reduce waste. Concerning your long-term plan, how long will that plan be? To answer your question, in terms of food waste, it is about the treatment of food waste, turning food waste into energy. Now we have the first factory in Lantau, 200 tons per day. We believe that we can make full use of that, and if the second plant is completed, then there will be another 300 tons, which we can deal with. We have several thousand tons of food waste collected per day, and therefore we need the plants. The question is how to speed up the process of turning food waste into energy. Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, your first round. Chairman, the creation of so many posts creates high hopes. We want to see real change. We want to see something concrete being done. As for the food waste factory, we hope that it can be completed very soon. And there is no question about it. We need to deal with food waste at the final end. The PEPO is responsible for the PRS on beverage plastic bottles, and there is also another officer to deal with disposable plastic tableware. We have been discussing the problem of dealing with plastics. We agree that it has not been treated well. With the PRS, with the phasing out of plastic tableware, do you have a timetable? What are the KPIs? When are these KPIs achieved? Donald and Vicky will answer these questions. Ms. Ng, the DD. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Kwat, for the question. As for the timetable and the scheme for the PRS, the PEPO is a permanent post. As I've said before, he or she is responsible for the PRS on beverage plastic bottles. We are conducting a study on the way of dealing with plastic bottles. We are at the final stage of the study, and we will consult the stakeholders on implementation details. And upon completion of the plan, we'll consult the public on the PRS. If the PRS on plastic beverage bottles is agreed by all, then we'll have to get the law passed to deal with that. Well, we can see that in the paper. My question, therefore, is how can you measure the success? What are your KPIs? When will you be able to do it? Dealing with plastic bottles is not limited to the PRS. Will the new post created be responsible for handling waste plastics, and not just the PRS? The DD. As for KPIs or targets, the PEPO is responsible for the duties listed. We set targets for these duties, and the timetable. We'll have the reverse recycling machines, reverse vending machines, RVMs. We hope that there will be a pilot scheme within the year, so that we can fully implement the RVMs. The number required and also the locations are also important, and we'll look into that. And apart from the PRS for plastic bottles, there's also a study on disposable plastic tableware, and Mrs. Kwok can supplement. Yes, let me speak on the disposable plastic tableware. As said by the Secretary earlier on, we are conducting a study on overseas experience and also the situation in Hong Kong as to whether we need to control the use of disposable plasticware. We need to consider the habits of the people of Hong Kong, and also whether there are replacements. We hope that the study can be completed in 2020 and then report to the Council on our conclusion and consult your advice. At the same time, We are working with the government departments and will take the lead. In government canteens, we have stopped distributing foam boxes and also plastic straws. We will work through tendering and retendering exercises in government canteens and other venues so as to reduce the use of plastic tableware. We work with the trade to encourage people to use less disposable plastic tableware and make use of more reusable tableware. There's the branch, or there's the bureau. Well, you have to wait for your second round. Mr. Felix Chung, your first round. Our daily life involves various aspects, and in terms of clothing, there is no policy. I only have the latest number on 2015. In 2015, there were about 110 million tons of garment disposed of. It is about 25,000 T-shirts disposed per day. Is there any policy for recycling of old clothes? 90% are put in the landfills. Every year, you are going to dump 25. You are going to dump old clothes which can fill up 25,000 Hong Kong stadium. What a big waste! Why there is no policy on recycling of old clothes? That's a serious environmental issue. So what can be done? The Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chung. With regard to municipal waste charging, a very important concept is to reduce waste at source.
Well, some of the clothes have not been worn out, and they will be disposed of right away, and therefore we will have to step up our efforts. Other than reducing waste at source, we also have this used clothes market and also the collection of used clothes. Well, the HAD has got this used clothes recycling bin set up in individual districts. So if you look at the overall situation, reducing waste at source would be the most important part of it. So to answer your question, well, with regard to MSW charging, we'll be adopting a multi-pronged approach. We'll be targeting different types of waste, and then for the charges that we're going to receive, we'll be plowing it back to promoting clean recycling and also reducing waste at source. So we have an open and positive mind about this. So we'll be doing this comprehensively, including clothes. We'll be stepping up our efforts so that we'll reduce waste at source, and we'll also be stepping up recycling. So there is a lot of room for discussion, and if there are new resources available after the introduction of the charging scheme, if we can set up a dedicated fund for dedicated purpose, then we are open to that. But then, do you have dedicated staff responsible for used clothes recycling? Do you have dedicated staff on that? Well, for certain materials, we'll be targeting them. But then, as I said, for different materials like textile and garment, so how are we able to reduce waste at source, and how are we able to support reuse of used clothes. So we have this WRO, which will be responsible for coordination, and if there is any room for improvement in a particular area, we'll be prepared to target that area. I think there is a lot of room for improvement because you don't have any policy at all right now on recycling of used clothes. As I said, well, you're talking about some 25,000 Hong Kong stadium being used for dumping used clothes is a very serious environmental problem. So why are you not working on it? So Secretary, I've repeatedly talked to you about this and you said that it's noted and you deal with it. But then it's been years. So it's 4 years since 2015 and yet there is no policy at all. Secretary, I'll explain with figures. Well, if you look at the largest amount, some 80% of the waste is food waste and also waste paper and waste plastics. So that would account for some 80% of the space being used in landfills. And of course, other types of waste would also account for a very serious problem. But then we will have to set priorities. You will understand that for food waste, waste plastic and waste paper, the reason why they have taken up such a high priority. But still, we will have to have a roadmap as to how we're going to deal with it in the future. If you do not think about it, there will be no policy at all. Well, you can ask again. I'll lock in first round. I'd just like to make a comment. So that's about the post for the EPD to deal with waste policy. Well, in simple terms, you're going to create these posts in order to promote your green policy. I think that's something that should be supported. As to whether or not you're really able to do it, that's another matter. And of course, I hope that you can make improvements in terms of your environment policy. But then for the assistant director post, all right, he'll be responsible for promoting the CGS project. As we understand it, the community green stations project has been something that I've been arguing with the administration. Well, I supported your proposal to set up CGS in individual district, but then there is a chance that I might have to pay the price for it because you will have to talk to the stakeholders in the district about this. And yet very often, well, because the Development Bureau will have to buy properties and apparently that has taken up a higher priority. So you can see how low we have fallen to. So whether or not you're creating these posts and that you are being the secretary for the environment, you will have to work harder. Whether it's about identifying sites for CGS and also recycling and so on. Well, if you come across district councillors like myself who are prepared to support you, then you will have to really work with your fellow bureaus to ensure that that can be done, or else the government will not be able to honor its pledge. Apparently, development always comes first and has a higher priority than environmental protection. Yes, I understand it. I've talked to him about this before. Felix Chong is about policy priorities. Well, yes, the secretary said that in the landfills, 80% of the waste is from food waste, plastic, paper, and plastic, and also waste paper. Yes, you have policies to deal with that, and as a result, the percentage will come down in the future. But then for garment and also waste textile, if you do not deal with that, the percentage will then gradually go up. Because as said, well, if you look at 2015 figures, you're talking about the size of 25,000 Hong Kong stadiums. And then by now, we may be talking about some 35,000. I'm sure the administration does not have such figures. So if you choose to ignore the problem, it's already a very serious problem. So we are talking about used clothes and they are being disposed of as waste. So why are you not sitting down and thinking about the policies? So you're not even prepared to think about the policy and direction. I've been asking you for several years now. And if you think that is a serious problem, then I'm sure we all know that it's a serious problem because overall speaking, if you look at the per capita waste textile when compared to other advanced economies in the world, we are actually talking about several times higher than theirs. why is it that we are not dealing with them? And we know that it's a growing trend. So why are you not prepared to think about the policy at all? Secretary. Madam Chair, it's not that we are not prepared to think about it. We have the overall waste reduction policy. Yes, we might be talking about different policies so that in all walks of life, in every part of our daily life, we try to reduce waste, but then waste quantity is a big challenge for Hong Kong, and of course we will have to set priorities. That's why we believe that food waste, waste plastics and waste paper are our top priorities, and we are also thinking about ways of recycling such waste. So if you think that is a very important indicator, that is for the quantity of waste, and if you think that used clothes is a problem, then of course we'll be prepared to think about it. So we are prepared to come up with policies to deal with this gradually. So you suggested that you're going to take a step-by-step approach. All right, it's been 4 years since 2015 when I first took that up with you, and still there is no sign of any policy coming in our way. So what do you mean by taking a step-by-step approach? Well, in the past few years, we have been focusing on food waste, and now we are extending it to plastic and also waste paper, and then glass bottles and so on. So we are facing or rising to the challenge of these types of waste, and we have set our priorities, and we are dealing with them one by one. That's the direction that we have taken, and I'm sure both this council and the community would understand that and would be prepared to support us. And if you think that waste garment is a problem, then we'll be prepared to cover it. Well, Madam Chair, as you can see, according to the Secretary, he said that the Bureau and the department have already set up recycling bins for used clothes and so on. But then they've been left idling. In fact, sometimes you can see the used clothes spilling over from the bins. And then in our daily life, clothing is a very important part. So how come for the other parts you give them priority but not clothing? So when are you going to genuinely take it seriously? So you have answered that several times. So can you be brief? All right, reducing waste at source is a very important part of it. That's why we have the CGS, and we have been collecting different types of waste, including used clothes. So they can also get used clothes for free. So in terms of clothing, we hope that we can also reduce waste at source. Eunice Yong, first round. Madam Chair, I support the proposal to set up to create the 9 posts under the Bureau and the Department, and on different occasions I've already reflected my views to them. Well, in fact, for recycling efforts, we are supportive of that, and we believe that the administration should also step up publicity and education, in particular for the grassroots. It's hard for them, because all of a sudden you ask them to buy garbage bags to collect their waste. It's difficult. But then at the same time, I've been telling the Secretary time and again, that is in introducing waste charging. Why are you not covering waste sorting as well? Because I do have a lot of skepticism, because we have done a lot in terms of educating the public so that they know that waste collection is at a cost or at a price. Then why are we not doing waste sorting? Do we have to wait for another 10 years? Why can we not collect waste with different color bags? For example, you have the green bags for waste collection, but then obviously I'll try to put in as much waste as possible, including both food waste and other types of waste. Then precisely we will not be able to sort the waste at source. So how are we able to deal with that problem? Should we start now so that we can have different color bags to collect different waste? And also at the district, we can see that you have the tricolor waste bins, but then very often they are bursting to the seams. For example, in Mao On Shan, at the transport interchange, we can see that there are some carton boxes and yet they cannot be squeezed in. So who will be monitoring the mechanism, and is there a chance for us to review the waste collection scheme? Thank you. All right, my colleague Vicky can supplement. I agree with what you said. That is, while introducing the waste charging scheme, we will also have to step up other support measures, including publicity and education, and how they can make better use of the garbage bins and so on. I agree that in some places, we'd be using different color bags to wrap up waste, and also for different types of waste. But then in Hong Kong, in the past, we have the tricolor bins for waste collection. There is no need for people to put their waste into color bags before they can be disposed of. And if that is the past practice, then there is no need for the waste to be put into bags before they can be put into the bins, because it's less it will, because by putting them into bags, it will waste more. But then we will also have to ensure that there will be clean recycling, so that we can increase the size of the bins. And for bins that are bursting to the seams, then if possible, we will be prepared to provide them with more bins, because for housing estates, because we'd like to step up clean recycling, then we'll be prepared to give them more bins. As to education and publicity, I'll defer to my colleague. Yes, Mrs. Kwok. Thank you. In fact, overall speaking, in terms of environmental education, we attach a lot of importance to district education. And as the Secretary said, we have the waste sorting at source, and we have the tricolor bins, and also in public spaces, we also have the recycling bins, and also we have the CRS, which have been set up under the education, the Environmental Conservation Fund, and we would also be supporting that on a regular basis, so that the service can be more comprehensive and more tailor-made for the needs of the community. We have also got the outreaching teams, and in Sha Tin, in Eastern District, and also Kwun Tong, we have already started the pilot schemes, and we are actually talking to different stakeholders in the district to set up a more effective network. And then for public housing estates, if there is a need for improving the recycling bins, we'll be able to do that, so that we can ensure that the waste collected will be able to send to the recyclers. And also for the community recycling centers, that would provide a very good support and also network to support the districts on education. We hope that face-to-face we'll be able to approach different tenants and residents that, for clean recycling and waste sorting, they are very important in order to ensure that for the waste collected, the quality and quantity will also go up, and that will also be beneficial to the recycling industry as a whole.
Two proposals. First, in public space, there can be some recycling bins with compression functions, so that more recyclable waste can be collected. And other suggestion is to have these recycling machines in public housing estates. Second round, Mr. Felix Chung. The third round, my third round, is on waste separation among households. Now, waste separation should start at source. You have plastic bottles, glass bottles, food waste, everything is put in a waste collection bag. Who is to do the recycling for me if I don't do waste separation at source? So you rely on self-discipline. Why can't you start at source, as suggested by Ms. Yong? Different types of bags for different types of waste. Say a bag for plastic bottle, a bag for food waste, a bag for paper, a bag for bottles, and that helps waste separation, and that helps recycling. But now you just rely on self-discipline, and if I put everything into one bag, then how can you do waste separation? Well, that's a common question, Mr. Secretary. waste charging and detailed arrangements for waste separation and recycling. We've asked the Sustainable Development Council to conduct a public engagement exercise on waste charging and also waste separation. There are dedicated bags and bins for waste separation or for waste recycling. Overseas, there are different kinds of overseas experience on waste separation. The people of Hong Kong have got used to the 3-color bins. Well, that's a kind of habit. We consider the mainstream opinions of the public engagement exercise. The suggestion or recommendation is that we should try to keep up with the separation habits, and also concerning the reduction of plastics. We're working towards that direction. Our suggestion is that we charge a waste paper, we charge a refuse bag, and if you put different things into the recycling bins, then you will put less waste into the waste bag, which carries a charge, and that helps the habit of waste separation at source. Mr. Chu, I take your third round. Thank you, Chairman. Just like what my colleagues have said, the trend is that those countries which used to receive waste from advanced countries are shutting their door, are closing their doors. Recently, the Philippines has closed its doors on some of the waste exported from Hong Kong, and also the PEPO agreement also proposed to impose restrictions on plastics. With regard to the worldwide regulation on plastics, will there be any change in Hong Kong? Hong Kong is an entrepot for a lot of waste materials, and there is some processing in Hong Kong, and then the waste is processed waste is exported. With the tightening of control on waste import, will there be any change which will impact on Hong Kong? Or do you consider this as a kind of trade and it's not related to our waste policy? I don't know what you're thinking, Mr. Secretary. I think the question thank you, Chairman. The member has asked a very broad question. I cannot give a general answer to that. We are watching very closely the development in the international community. And we also watch very closely the policy of our country. And we hope that we will enhance the recycling of waste in Hong Kong. The WEEE is to tighten control on electronic waste. And we hope that we can more properly deal with these electronic waste, which have a very serious impact on the environment. Mr. Chu, well, the recycling business are handling more overseas waste than the waste produced in Hong Kong. If you get more land for them to build more factories, and you will suffer from pressure. If you help them to find land, then you underline the maintenance of Hong Kong as a base for recycling waste? Well, on the WEEE, it has reflected our view. In the past, there are different waste treatment, waste processing companies which deal with waste from overseas. But with the WEEE project, we send the message that we should focus on handling local waste, and we impose control on the re-export of import and re-export of trade of waste. So will you also step up your regulation on plastics? Well, it depends on the overall situation as far as waste is concerned. What I can say is that local waste recycling is something that need to improve upon. We have a policy on that. There is a contract on central recycling of waste, of plastic waste, and that will help to solve the problem. Well, I have another appointment after the meeting, so there will be no extension of time. And I give the floor to Mr. Chu, and then we will end our meeting after Mr. Chu has asked his question. Do we have enough time to cast a vote? Mr. Chu, please be quick. Just a simple point. Just now, the Secretary said that he intended to put the bill on the three-color bins within the portfolio of the EPD. It will take it from the FEHD. Now, concerning the plastic bottles, will that come under the rule of the EPD and Environment Bureau, and so the FEHD will have a lesser role to play in the future? Ms. Kwok, Madam Kwok. The Secretary just now referred to the central collection of waste plastics free of charge. That's in line with the MSW policy, charging policy. And we have a pilot scheme in 3 areas in providing free collection of plastic waste from domestic households. And we have tendered the contract for the Eastern District. In Sha Tin and Kwun Tong, we will also have a tendering exercise in the near future. So you will consider ending the contract in respect of the 3-color bins? Well, we are actively handle that. It will be done by the EPD. Okay, I'll put the proposals in the paper to the vote. We have a quorum, right? Yes, we do. Please ring the bell. We have enough time to call a division.
等九。請各位開始表決。
Please proceed to vote. And before I display the result, please verify your votes. And the results are now displayed. 29 present, 25 for, 2 objections, 1 abstention. Do we need to have it voted on separately at the FC meeting? Okay. Okay. What's the time of the next meeting? Secretary. 11th of June, 2:30 to 6:30, 4-hour meeting. All right, meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.